Picture this. You walk through a gate so tall it takes your breath away. The walls gleam with blue tiles. Gold lions line the processional way. The smell of incense, myrrh, and cedar hits you before you even enter. This is Babylon, the most powerful city the ancient world ever built. The year is 562 before the Common Era. King Nebuchadnezzar II stands at the peak of his power. His empire stretches from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon are already one of the 7 wonders of the world. His capital has more than 200,000 residents. His astronomers track the planets. His engineers build ziggurats that pierce the sky. Babylon is, without question, the technological and cultural superpower of its age. But here is the part that gets me every time. The same civilization that invented the 60-second minute and the 7-day week collapsed. Not in one blow, not from a single enemy. The fall of Babylon was slow, almost invisible, and the cause was the same force that has destroyed every great civilization in human history: corruption. Scholars like historian Stephen Bertman and archaeologist Donald Redford have spent their careers mapping exactly how Babylon fell. Their findings tell a story that feels eerily familiar. Babylon did not die from outside. It died from inside. From the greed of its rulers, the cowardice of its priests, the silence of its people, and the slow erosion of every institution that once made it great. You need to understand what made Babylon extraordinary in the first place. By 3800 before the Common Era, the people of Sumer, in the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, were already inventing things we still use today. They invented the wheel. They invented riding. They invented the plow. They invented irrigation. They invented beer. And most importantly, they invented the city. Cities were not natural. For most of human history, our ancestors lived in small bands of hunter-gatherers. Cities required something new. They required people to trust strangers, to obey laws they did not write, to pay taxes to rulers they did not choose, to defend walls they did not build. Cities required civilization itself. The Sumerians built the first cities: Uruk, Lagash, Eridu. Then the Akkadians, under Sargon the Great, unified them into the world's first empire around 2300 before the Common Era. After them came the Babylonians, who rose to power around 1894 before the Common Era under King Hammurabi. Hammurabi is famous for his law code, one of the earliest written legal systems in history. 282 laws carved into a black stone pillar over 7 feet tall. The top shows Hammurabi receiving the laws from the sun god Shamash. The laws covered everything from property disputes to medical malpractice to what happens if your ox kills a man. But here is what most people miss. Hammurabi's laws were not fair by our standards. They were explicitly class-based. If a nobleman killed another nobleman, he was put to death. If a nobleman killed a commoner, he paid a fine. If a commoner killed a nobleman, he was put to death. The system was designed to protect the powerful, not to serve justice. It was a brilliant tool for keeping order, but it baked inequality into the foundations of Babylonian society. The Babylonians were also the first people to study the stars systematically. Their astronomers tracked the movements of Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus. They developed a lunar calendar. They divided the day into 24 hours, the hour into 60 minutes, and the minute into 60 seconds. Every clock in your house, every watch on your wrist, every timer on your phone uses Babylonian time. They invented the 7-day week. They invented the concept of the zodiac. They invented the 12-month calendar that the Romans later copied and that we still use today. Their clay tablets record eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and weather patterns. They were the world's first scientists, and they were brilliant at it. But Babylon did not last. Why? Because every institution that made it powerful was eventually captured by the very people who were supposed to serve it. Let's start with the monarchy. The Babylonian king was supposed to be the servant of the gods and the shepherd of his people. His job was to maintain order, ensure justice, and keep the temples fed. In theory, he answered to the gods. In practice, he answered to no one. Early Babylonian kings were hard-working administrators. Hammurabi personally supervised the digging of canals and the repair of city walls. His successors did the same. But as the empire grew richer, the kings grew lazier. By the reign of Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon, the royal court had become a sinkhole of luxury and intrigue. Nabonidus preferred to live in a palace in the desert, collecting antiquities, while his son Belshazzar ran the capital badly. Then there was the priesthood. The temples of Babylon, especially the great temple of Marduk called the Esagila, controlled vast amounts of land and wealth. The priests were supposed to be independent moral voices. They were supposed to speak truth to power. Instead, they became a wealthy hereditary caste. Temple positions were sold to the highest bidder. Oracles were for sale. The priests who should have called the king to account instead blessed whatever the king did, as long as the donations kept flowing. And then there was the bureaucracy. Babylon ran on records. Every transaction, every tax payment, every conscripted worker was logged on clay tablets. The scribes who kept these records were the backbone of the empire. But over time, the bureaucracy became its own enemy. Officials took bribes to falsify records. Tax collectors skimmed off the top before the tax ever reached the treasury. Judges sold verdicts. Generals sold exemptions from military service. By the 6th century, before the Common Era, the signs of decay were everywhere. The irrigation canals that made Babylonian agriculture possible were silting up because the government could not afford to maintain them. The walls of Babylon itself were crumbling. The provinces were drifting away. When the Persian king Cyrus the Great marched on Babylon in 539 before the Common Era, the city fell almost without a fight. The priests of Marduk, tired of their own king, opened the gates. Babylon had spent 400 years building institutions. It took one generation of corruption to lose them all. But here is the twist. Babylon's fall was not just about greed. It was about something deeper. It was about what happens when a society stops believing in its own purpose. The Babylonians believed their city was eternal. They believed Marduk, their chief god, would never let Babylon fall. When the priests told the people that the gods were on their side, people believed it. They stopped worrying. They stopped paying attention. They stopped holding their leaders accountable. Have you ever noticed that in your own life? The thing you take for granted is usually the first thing to fail. The bridge you drive over every day without thinking. The job you assume will always be there. The freedom you assume the government will always protect. Babylonians believed their empire was permanent. They were wrong. Corruption finished what complacency started. Now you might be thinking, why does this matter to me? I do not live in Babylon. I do not worship Marduk. What does a civilization that fell 2,500 years ago have to do with my life today? Here is the answer. Every institution you depend on was built by people who faced the same temptations Babylonians faced. The police, the courts, the hospitals, the schools, the companies you work for, the governments you live under. Every one of them is one generation of corruption away from collapse. When a politician starts taking bribes, the system he represents weakens. When a CEO starts cooking the books, the company he runs bleeds. When a judge starts selling verdicts, the justice system rots. Babylon was not special. Babylon was just the first place we saw it happen on a civilizational scale. The lesson of Babylon is simple. Institutions do not fall because their enemies are too strong. They fall because the people inside them stop caring. They fall because the slow, daily, almost invisible act of choosing personal enrichment over public service adds up, year after year, until the whole structure comes down. You cannot see corruption in the moment. It feels small. A favor here, a shortcut there, a lie to protect yourself, a number massaged to look better. By the time you can see it, it is usually too late. Babylon's lesson is your lesson. Watch the institutions around you. Watch the leaders. Watch yourself. The things you take for granted are the things most at risk. And remember this: the fall of Babylon was not inevitable. It was not written in the stars, despite what their astronomers believed. It was the result of choices. Small choices. Daily choices. Made by people who thought they were too small to matter. They were wrong. Corruption was the main reason for the collapse. Thank you for watching. If you found this video valuable, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might be interested. See you in the next video.